All right, welcome back for question number 5, which is eat, sleep, debug, repeat. So before we go into this question, let's take a look and see what it's asking for. So we're trying to make a function tester that takes in an integer param n. So that's the first intake. A list of functions, function list, so that's the second, and a conditional function. So that's the third input. And a conditional function is defined as a function that takes in one argument and returns either true or false, so a Boolean condition. All right, the function tester runs each of the functions on the fn list on this particular parameter param n and returns a list of all the values for which condition returns true. However, the implementation right now is buggy, and because of that, we need to find 3 bugs in the following program. We have line numbers for easy reference, and they are not one of the bugs. We can't say something like, oh, it doesn't compile because, or it doesn't like run correctly because there are line numbers on the side. All right, and then we can identify the bugs in any order. Before we go into actually really identifying the bugs, let's go through this little test case first. So in the first 3 lines, I have 3 different lambda functions. All of them take in an x and do certain operations on this x that they take in. Next up, I have this is positive, and it takes in a value x and it returns a Boolean. And just because it returns a Boolean, I'm going to take a swing at it and say that this is our conditional function. And then last but not least, we have this call to tester. Well, so I have this tester is equal to 88. So this is the number I'm passing in. This is the list of functions, and this is the condition. So essentially we want to check if we call add 1 on 88, would this return a true value that would this return a value that is positive in this scenario? And it does. So we add it to our list, 89. Or this should result in 89. My bad. And we check if this 89 value meets the requirements of this conditional function, which it does, because this conditional function only checks that x is greater than 0. And because it does, we add it into this list that we want to return. Cool. And now we go on to the next function in here, which is negate. So after calling negate on 88, we get negative 88. And we ask ourselves again, is this number positive? Or if I called is positive on negative 88, would this return true? And the answer is no, it would not return true. It would return false. And because it returns false, I don't add it to the return, the list of items that will be returned. And then last but not least, we have this function double. So we call double on 88, and we get the value 176. And we ask ourselves, if I call is positive on 176, will I return the value true? And I say, yes, that is the case. And because it does return true, I want to add 176 to my list to be returned. So that's how I get this 89 and 176 as an output. All right, cool. So with that, let's take a quick scan over the code. We'll erase this for space. And what I'll probably end up doing, because I just can't scroll down, is I'll end up listing them on the side. All right, something that helps me when I do these kind of problems is I like to really comment every single line. I'm very notorious for writing comments in my code. So something that helps me, especially when things aren't named very well or named in a confusing manner, is I like to just write comments everywhere. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, this new list is an empty list. So that's fine, right? This should be, I ask myself, what should this represent? And I want to tell myself that this represents the final list we return. Because notice that there's no real other list here. And we do return, the return value of this function is a list. So I'm guessing now that this new list is what I will be returning in the end. So now I'm iterating through functions. And I set I is equal to the function fn of n. I'm looking through the code so far and I don't see an n defined anywhere. So I will mark that down on as my first bug. Line 3, n should be param n. So this should actually be param n, not n. Okay, so I'll like write a little x on the 3. And what it's supposed to do once I fix it is it's supposed to call function on my param n. Cool. So now the next thing that we have to do according to our function is we need to check the condition variable to see if it's true, the condition function. So I have this if case right here that seems to be doing that. So I check if cond param n, but then the thing I want to ask myself is, should I really be calling this cond param on n or param n? And the answer here is no. I should be calling it on the result of my function. So if I look once again at this test case, the reason we don't include negative 88 is because we called negate on 88, and then after that we check is positive. So I guess we can assign this value to I. And we check the value is positive I. We don't check the value 88, we check the value negative 88. So it's after we apply the function. So there's a bug in line 4, which is we should call the function, or we should call the, not the function, but the cond param on I rather than on n, because we want to apply this condition after we call the function on our input. All right. Okay, so now let's go inside this line. We have new list plus I. So there's a couple of issues with this. The first one is that you can't add together a list and an integer. So I's return type is an integer, and we know that because in the example, like we're given, like if we call like negate 88, it gives us negative 88, which is an integer. So we know that we can't just add an integer to a list. So one possible fix for this is making it like this, making its own list, because we can add two lists together. But things are still kind of off here. And the thing that's still off here is even if I do a new list plus I, I'm not changing the value of new list. What I actually need to do is I need to set new list is equal to new list plus I. So a third error here is on line 5. And the error is number 1, that we should add I here as a list. Or we can also call append. We can do something like new list dot append I. Or the other thing we can do here, or the other thing that we're missing if we choose to add I as a list, is we need to also reassign new list to be equal to new list plus I in this brackets. All right, cool. And then last but not least, we have line 6, else return new list. So honestly, we don't really need this else case. And like the error, like the actual error here is that in the case that const param is not true, it immediately returns my new list, which is not something I want to do. And the reason for that is I want to call all of my functions before I return the list. So notice in the example test they gave, tester88 add one negate double, this negate results in const param of I being false because is positive on -8 called on -88 is false. But notice how even though it is false, we don't immediately return from the function. We actually go on to the next value and call double. So this shouldn't actually return a new list. So here the indentation is wrong. It should actually be aligned with the for because we only want to return the list after we have gone through the entire list of functions on our input. And because of that, there's not really any like code we need inside the else. So the next bug is going to be in line 7 or 6/7. You don't need the else case. And return new list should be less indented, I guess is a way to say that. And with that, we're at the end of the function, and I have found all the bugs in the following program. Cool beans.